Hi, everybody. Welcome to the next session at the Purpose Driven Business Summit. For those of you that made time to join us live, we're really glad you're here. And I want to also welcome those of you that are watching the recording later. I think everybody, whether you're watching it live or later, you're going to get some great food for thought out of this session with Nate from Kite Dart Group. But before we start the conversation, I want to just remind you of a couple things. One, all the recordings from all the speakers are going to be up in the YouTube channel. And if this happens to be the only one you're listening to live, I just want to remind folks that to get to the recordings, you have to use the link that I've been sending out, because if you just go search for it on your own, it's in a playlist that it's unlisted, so you have to use the link to get in. And I also want to remind people, we do have the private Facebook group set up. It has quite a few people in there. There just hasn't been a whole lot of dialogue, but I do want to encourage you to share ahas, what you're up to. In some ways, the Facebook group is the way that we're able to have a little bit of networking in the time of Zoom. So just want to point that out. But I want to turn to the star attraction for this session. A little groundwork for why I'm really excited that Nate is here. I ran into Nate in Denver about a year ago. I went to some of the free trainings that his company was doing. And what I found was there's a way that he was talking about business and about how to use business as an instrument of social justice that really resonated with me. And so I think he's got some really interesting insights to share. I think it's gonna, for some of you, it may rock your world a little bit. And so, you know, it's great food for thought. And for some of the rest of you, you're going to think, wow, where has this guy been my whole life? Because he's talking about business in a way that is a bit unusual, as you will hear really soon. So Nate, thank you so much for being willing to be here and share your ideas and insights, because I think, you know, the summit, there were like two main drivers for me to put this together. One is we hear so much bad news every day. And I know firsthand that there's a lot of folks that are incorporating good into their business and really out there trying to change the world, but they don't get heard from enough. And the other thing is I think there's a lot of people trying to figure out what's their next gig and how do they do something new? How do they stand for their values? And, you know, sometimes thinking about joining the business world is a little off-putting for a whole lot of reasons that I know we're going to talk about. So I really did want people to hear from you specifically, because I think you have some things that will help people understand maybe some of their hesitance to move into action. So welcome.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your background and how did you start, why did you start Kite Dart Group?
I mean, that's a story in and of itself. I often describe myself as the most reluctant entrepreneur in any room. And you addressed a lot of the what is that called? The what to warn people about. So I'm a cisgendered white dude, and I yell and I swear, and I get that that's going to land a certain way for certain people, and I'm responsible for that. And you know, it's a constant inquiry for me in terms of what it is to be a white man in this culture, about where self-expression ends and people's feelings begin. The other thing is I'm a adamant anti-white supremacist, and I'm not committed to catering to white folks' right to comfort. So the way that I talk about a lot of these issues is more like based on the mandate of what BIPOC people are asking me to say or how BIPOC people are asking me to communicate, and less driven by white folks wanting to feel comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the good kind of like disclaimer before we get started. And this wasn't the way our business was in the beginning. So, I mean, it's a long story. I've been a lot of things. I've been a musician. I've been a sales trainer. I've been a general manager of stores. I've been an indirect account representative. I've owned 2 or 3 businesses. And in this current iteration, what happened was I was rotating out of a chief operating officer job in cannabis industry, which is funny because I'm a person in recovery and I've been sober for over 13 years. And I had the opportunity to help grow a cannabis startup from, $250,000 a year to 1.75 million, and deal with just a tremendous amount of changing legislation here in Colorado. And as a result of working there, the CEO and owner of that business, Sean Yendy, got into a lot of personal development work, and he paid for a lot of personal development work for me, and I got to do a lot of really cool things and learn from a lot of really cool people. And I worked for Whole Foods for a time, so I've always been interested in this idea of where does activism and business combine? And so the Kite Dart Group started, my wife and I started it simply as a place to create like a curated community of entrepreneurs who are interested in bringing more intentionality into their businesses. And what it's become is a conversation for really transformation. Not only the transformation of the world through business, but also focusing on the specific journey and the transformative journey of an entrepreneur as they start to really find what it is to be self-expressed inside of business. And that's kind of where we're at. There's a lot of nuance in the story, but that should pretty much get people where they're at. We've been in business for almost 5 years. We have over 200 clients, and we've sold well over $250,000 worth of coaching in the last 4 years. So we're, by capitalist standards, we are highly qualified.
There you go. Well, let's talk about your view of the patriarchal business model.
Right into it, Sue.
Just go straight for it. And how that gets in the way of things.
For people.
For some people.
Yeah. So, first of all, I'm not a sociologist or a psychologist. I'm interested in these matters, though. And I got interested early on. What happened was when I started this business, my wife had a tremendously reputable background in entrepreneurship. She owns a real estate company called Lux Denver and a very successful consulting firm now called Humano UX. And I shaved off my mohawk and quit working in the weed business and became a business consultant. Now, the thing is I got a lot of white male privilege, which helped me with the transition. And I got that. Yeah. And I'd owned some businesses before. But so what we ended up with, though, was a combination of my people and Emily's people. So you basically had who Emily had known, and she was a founder of a ABNG group in Denver and was networking inside of like this alternative networking scene for a while. And then a bunch of people that I knew from Burning Man that had businesses. And so we started off with deviants, really, what we call non-traditional entrepreneurs now. And in order for my business to survive, I had to figure out what those folks were dealing with. And what I discovered initially was that that oftentimes folks who were really good at what they did weren't very good at talking about it in a way that created conversion.
Yeah.
And they tended to make some really bad choices, like some illogical choices about business. And so I just got curious about that. I got curious about why or how do entrepreneurs choose what to do next? And that's kind of what started it. And so it's like this, look, you live in a culture that's got, we've got 10,000 years of patriarchy and class oppression. And we have a tremendous problem with unequal distribution of wealth in this country. And if you don't believe me, you can get off the Zoom now. Sorry, Sue. I'm just not interested in it. I'm not interested in having a conversation with people who don't or aren't willing to accept that our entire country was built on systemic inequality. So what happens is in this, in this stage of development of capitalism in our country, the players that have the most money have the ability to influence the rules of the game.
Mm-hmm.
So the narrative for business is really being driven by a bunch of oligarchs, right? Folks who have either been in business for so long that they've been able to change the rules of the game, right? And then you throw in some white supremacy and some patriarchy and some racism, you're pretty clear whose voice is dominating what we know about business. And the unfortunate problem is what Coca-Cola does to make their business work is fully and completely incompatible or useless to what we would call a non-traditional entrepreneur. Who's a non-traditional entrepreneur? Well, if you didn't inherit $8 million in your rich white conservative father's business, you're a non-traditional entrepreneur. And that's not to say that all non-traditional entrepreneurs are dealing with the same things, because they're not. BIPOC folks need different things than women do, than white men do in terms of support and entrepreneurialism. But basically, what worked for someone who came to the game with 10 years of operating expenses or even more, or the not needing to make money is not applicable because of classism.
Yeah. And then one of the things I know you talked about in various sessions where I've heard you speak is, sometimes even if we know we don't fit in one of those categories and we don't have even if there's other privilege, maybe we don't have the $8 million bank account to help get stuff off the ground, but there's we have to do it sort of how Coca-Cola did it, or
right.
The whole equivalency piece that.
Yeah, totally. Right. Yeah. What works for a rich white dude ain't going to work for you.
Right.
If you're in a position in your life where you're thinking about starting a business already, what worked for those businesses isn't going to work for you. Mm-hmm. It's right. The thing is the system, patriarchal systems like ours are designed to prevent class mobility. That's especially in capitalism. We get that. Nobody's encouraging competition in the market. So the whole structure's in place is to keep people where they're at. And what is entrepreneurialism besides a big total fuck you to class mobility or to class structure, right? That's what we're saying. We're saying we are going to break the rules. And the systems don't exist by encouraging rule breaking. Everybody knows that. Curse in class when you're in 6th grade. See what happens. So there's nothing. It's not shocking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everybody knows this. Everybody knows the rich stay rich, the poor stay poor. Women know that men have an advantage in the marketplace, and white people know they have an advantage over BIPOC folks. And straight people have advantage over queer folks, and cis people have an advantage over non-binary folks. Everybody knows that. There's no question. That's just what's so. The question is, what do we do about it? Mm-hmm. Inequality is part of entrepreneurship. And any coaching methodology or business philosophy that doesn't take systemic inequality into account is by default useless. In terms of efficacy, certainly not in terms of marketability.
Well, one of the things that's always fascinated me, since you've kind of gotten me thinking more clearly about some of these things that I maybe just had impressions on, is, by the nature of it, most people that start any kind of a business as an entrepreneur, whether it's more of a traditional business, but they're putting their unique spin on it, people view themselves as, I'm in the Wild West. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not following the rules. I'm doing my own thing, but actually a bunch of them are still just following the traditional rules.
Right. Well, and to their defense, when we start our businesses, we have to model something.
Okay.
And we just don't have a lot of good examples in our culture of businesses that are willing to put anything above the bottom line. And it works more through, I think, internalization than anything else. Right? Where our subconscious mind is, you're going through that. I like to say this, the average person in the United States will see between 7,000 and 10,000 pieces of hyper-targeted marketing in a day. Maybe less now, but depends how much time you're spending on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
And all of that's where your brain is gathering information about how business is done. You know, like your brain is gathering information about how business is done by you doing business. In America, you're doing business with a lot of large corporations that frankly don't have to care about you in order for things to work. Grocery stores, healthcare, insurance providers, right? Privately owned prisons, privately owned court systems, right? Elections chosen by wealth and not voter turnout. You know what I mean? So we're not interacting generally with businesses that have to care. I mean, your mortgage company doesn't give a shit about you.
This I'm sure of.
They don't. No, they don't. So we don't, you know, and I get it, right? There are other businesses operating that way, but you know, if you want to know what your brain thinks business is, look at your checkbook. Look who you give most of your money to. That's what your brain knows is business. That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Right. The corporatization of business.
Right. And, you know, I think for a lot of folks that have been participating in the summit that want to start a business that is baking some kind of good or is taking a stand on a social or environmental issue into the DNA of their companies, you know, I think we've heard from some people, you know, they've had to just kind of have their head down because a lot of traditional business training doesn't actually, it tries to push people to well, just get really successful first and then redistribute the wealth back, as opposed to really trying to figure out how do you ingrain it from the beginning and really be able to live your values kind of like right out of the gate.
Yeah, totally. That's a tough situation, and I see it a lot.
Well, and then people are thrilled when they find you to do some business strategy with, because you get it in a different way.
Well, that's like we didn't, you know, I just wanted to make some money. I mean, I've always been interested in transformation, and I've always been interested in social justice. And, you know, and frankly, I grew up in a neighborhood where I was always looking for a pass for brown people anyway. I've just always been one of those, you know, white people who wanted something different, for better or for worse, right? Whether it's appropriation or not, that's just what's so.
Yeah.
And you know, and I didn't start off by wanting to create a curriculum for entrepreneurial activism. You know, I just wanted to help some people be successful. But what you're speaking to, right, is this, what I notice a lot of entrepreneurs deal with is this conflict that happens, right, between integrity and morality and what they think they need to do to make a business work. And there's a lack of a narrative or a way of being in entrepreneurship that teaches that authenticity, right, is what matters. So basically what happens is whenever anybody starts a business, they start off their business by like not wanting to say anything that would piss their conservative uncle off at dinner. And I get that when you're like me and you don't have a lot of money, and there was a lot of people who have a lot less money than I did, or a lot less resources than I did when I started this business. You know, there's this mentality that we have to leave the door open for everything. But, you know, the problem is like, you know, not everybody's going to buy from you, nor should they. So yeah, we've got it backwards, right? We've got it like self-expression is bad for business.
Yeah, I know I've like at times, you know, had a muzzle on myself. You know, when I wrote my book, Strategy for Good, you know, I like woke up one day and realized I had watered down the message and what I really believed about how businesses should be involved with nonprofits in the community, because I didn't piss people off. But then in the end, like I had a great neutral book that, you know, didn't actually help move the dialogue forward a ton. So like experience, I get it. Well, I see we do have a little bit coming in the chat. And I want to, things come up, please do put it in there. So there's one comment here that says, I've heard Trevor Noah say that it would probably be an advantage to call it colored disadvantage instead of white privilege. So what's your take on this slightly different perspective?
I'm not qualified to have an opinion that would trump Trevor Noah. Trevor Noah grew up in one of the most racist countries in the world. So if Trevor Noah says that we should call it colored disadvantage instead of white privilege, that's what we should probably do. I have coaches that are BIPOC folks that I pay to tell me how to talk. So, Edwin, I don't have an opinion. Probably Trevor Noah's right. I don't think white people should have that strong opinions on racism because we don't experience it. So I'm going to look into it, though. And I can tell you just personally as a human being, makes perfect sense.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Well, I will say one of the most interesting little mini snippets that I've had in my life is when I worked in Haiti, and being out and about and being like the only white American person around, that's the first I really saw some of the privilege stuff. I was like a 20-year-old kid, and then people were, some people were like assuming I had way more power than I felt like I had. But then when I looked around, there were a lot of people that had a lot less than I did.
Right.
They actually knew what they were talking about, so.
Yeah, well, when you get into, so white supremacy, let's talk about white supremacist culture. So, and we live in one. And it gets to us well before we do, and we're complicit in that system. And as white people, we get significant advantages based on the color of our skin at the loss of BIPOC folks, and we're responsible for that, whether we agree or not. I get advantages because I'm white, and the reason white people get advantages is because they take them away from BIPOC people, and so we're all on the hook, and we're all complicit, and there's nothing we can do about it. In terms of our complicity, you can't opt out of your complicity in a system of oppression. We're all, we're all in it. We're benefiting from it right now. I'm benefiting. You know how this is. So, and one of the fundamental characteristics of white supremacist culture is this idea of either or thinking, right? Mm-hmm. And you'll see this all the time. You see either a woman is oppressed or a person of color is oppressed. Or either I have privilege or I don't have privilege. And really what so is it's called sociology, folks. It's a whole science. If you're the kind of person who still thinks science is important. And there's a lot of talk about intersectionality, right? And I remember the birdcage hypothesis from a great sociology professor at community college. And he would say, and we talk about the birdcage hypothesis, which is if you look at any one of these oppressive forces singly, it's easy for people to get around it. But when you start to look at it comprehensively, you start to understand how the system works, right? The system works through internalization and through a conversation for difference. And late stage capitalism can only exist if it becomes actively engaged in preventing solidarity. And that's exactly how it's always worked from the beginning of this, probably well before the beginning of this country, but certainly since the beginning of this country. The economic system has worked specifically to prevent solidarity amongst the proletariat.
And promote competition and the haves and have-nots. Is that kind of what you're alluding to?
Yeah, it's right. Well, you'll have, so you have a lot of white Americans who identify more with billionaires than migrants trying to cross the border. But when you break it down economically, the human being has a lot, all of us have a lot more common with the folks trying to cross the border than we do with the president or with the oligarchy or with a billionaire. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just what's so. Now, whether folks want to deal with that or not is their business, but that's what's so.
And I think we've been sold the, anybody in the U.S. can make it if you work hard enough. But what I'm hearing you say is, you know, there's like institutional roadblocks that are in the way that actually doesn't make that true for everyone.
Well, you know, like, it's not true for everyone.
Hmm.
Now, right. And so you're speaking to the depth of the conditioning, right? Now we're going to start talking about the myth of American exceptionalism, which, you know, which folks would classify as seditious language. And, you know, what happened was, you know, this country was built on the backs of Black slaves and the corpses of first people.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some, you know, amazing, courageous bravery or whatever you want to call it on the behalf of the westward expansion. Okay, I got it, you know. And it's looking at it from an integral perspective, or more so understanding that the myth of American exceptionalism and the idea of the bootstrap hypothesis doesn't serve the common person, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, if I want you, look, I'm going to oppress you, Sue. I'm going to oppress you economically. Okay, I'm going to break the rules of the game in my favor, right? And to prevent you from coming after me, I'm just going to convince you it's your fault that you don't succeed. And then I'm going to get you to look at other people, and I'm going to get you to think that they didn't succeed because they didn't work hard enough.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all this system has to do is make people blind to privilege, and it prevents solidarity. I mean, that's what's preventing solidarity right now, is white people not saying, like, yeah, I had it hard, and Black people have it 10 times harder than me. And that's fucked up, so let's fix it. Now that's happening, right? It's happening. It's happening. Is it going to stick? We'll see. But that's what's, you know, that's what's up.
So what are you seeing, like people that are coming across your path that are looking to start businesses of kind, but since we're at the Purpose Driven Business Summit, let's kind of focus there. Like, are you seeing people being willing to step out and use business and be more of an entrepreneurial activist? You know, there's a bunch of newsletters now taking stands and this kind of thing. So
yeah.
Seems like it's becoming more acceptable sort of in the broader, but like what are you seeing?
So we're kind of siloed because of this type of narrative, right? So nobody's going to get near me that's not on board anyway, because this is how I talk, and I'm not dumbing it down anywhere. So you find us out in the world, this is the kind of stuff we're saying. So I'll acknowledge that I'm dealing with a subset of the market that's always been there. Are we seeing an increased interest in our programs? I mean, to some degree. I think, you know, and there's what there needs to be done in order for us to, you know, continue to do stuff like this and get the message out, right? Because we've been pretty quiet, not quiet, but like focused, intentional about who we spoke to. So what I'm seeing is a lot of what requires this to happen, Sue, is something we call transformation, right? So we can't go to existing businesses and say, okay, now all of a sudden to start talking about equity. What we have to do is really fundamentally address the entrepreneur's relationship to the place of equity, inclusivity in business, right? Fundamentally, we've got to transform an entrepreneur's relationship to business in general, right? Before they can move into this idea in an authentic way, right? Otherwise, you get this kind of like opportunism that shows up, which people can smell a mile away, right? Like, oh, wait, all of a sudden, you know, or, you know, you're going to put a lot of Black people on your website, but I'm going to show up at your business and it's all going to be white people, right? Like, people notice that shit. So that's cool that we notice it. So what we do is we have to identify how all of this nasty stuff has been internalized. So that's what we do, right? We have a curriculum. We have an entrepreneurial activist certification. We're in beta now, where folks can come and do some coursework and then demonstrate the principles of entrepreneurial activism and get certified, which is super fun. And that's the first thing we address is, okay, what's all this nasty stuff that you really think that you have to do that really you don't want to do? Well, you're right, you don't have to do it, but let's identify it. Okay? Let's call it out. Let's call out the elephant in the room. And then let's find a new way to think about business. That's what we call inside out. That's based on what folks are great at. That's based on what folks care about. That's based on contribution in addition to profit, right? And it's not like profit in and of itself is the problem. It's the profit above all way of thinking that we've internalized that creates that kind of cognitive dissonance in business that a lot of times will either push entrepreneurs into what we call analysis paralysis or Ushan, right? Where they are moving from option to option, bah, 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 or they come up with an idea and until they execute it, it's never good enough, right? And our job, right, as consultants is to get people to stop confusing activity with action. Because business, whether you like it or not, is about results.
Right. So when you start working with somebody that has an idea of something they want to develop into a business, I know like you talk about the PRTS, which—
Oh, we got all kinds of white people acronyms, right? Yeah.
Course commitments. So tell us, you've got a different way in to help people get clear. So,
you know, right. I love us. We're adorable, right? As entrepreneurs, first-time entrepreneurs, early entrepreneurs, any entrepreneur. Now, any entrepreneur that's successful will tell you there's a significant amount of luck involved. Okay, that's worth their salt. And luck can equate to privilege as well, right? Right place, right time, and a bunch of privileges is typically the story. So what will happen is folks will typically come to me with some idea of a business they have, okay? And so I'm like, cool, that's a great idea. Because it is, it's fine. And we want to examine its viability, right? And we want to be able to examine the viability. So like non-traditional entrepreneurs have limited resources. We can't try it 10 times, right? We have to look for, as consultants that are working in that with those kind of people, like we're working with you, you're a non-traditional entrepreneur, this is risky, right? So we've got to come up, to be responsible, we've got to come up with some predicator, right? Or we have to look at like what types of actions or what way, or how do we figure out like what's more likely to succeed? And what we found is, you know, when people do what they care about, first of all, okay, when they're directly related to the impact that their business has on the world, not like I'm going to do systemic oppression over here and then give some money to a charity over here, but when their businesses are actively aligned, like in the doing of the business, they get to do what they want. And they're doing what they're good at instead of what they think they should be good at as an entrepreneur, they tend to win. Now, I'm not talking about $1 million corporations here, but like the best way to kind of like, you know, dig out a living is to do what you're good at, like already good at, and to do what you care about and stop trying to get better or change or, you know, and that's what our work is. And that's transformative. It's inherently transformative because what it does is it radically empowers an entrepreneur. And if you're like me, you know, when you're under the gun like that, radical empowerment isn't part of the narrative for the beginning stages of entrepreneurship. And so that's what we try to do is get that radical empowerment in as soon as possible, right? And what does that mean? It means that we look at that idea then and we weigh it against what, you know, and it's fine. It's fine. Most of the time, people are right. The devil's in the details.
Yeah, always. Right. Well, I remember doing the exercise where it's like, okay, what are all the things you're good at? Which of you actually like to do? And I forget what the category is.
So we say, what are you passionate about? What are you confident in? And what do you have experience doing?
Yeah.
Right. You know, you're not going to, you know, if you're like me, you're stubborn as hell, you're not going to reinvent. You know, if your business requires you to reinvent yourself in order for it to work, it ain't going to work. It's inefficient, you know?
Yeah.
And we are in a game of margins, like return on investment. And an entrepreneur, you know, a non-traditional entrepreneur has a finite amount of money and a finite amount of time. So the actions that they take, that's what makes or breaks the business. If people come in and they want to talk about long-term strategy, and I'm like, show me your to-do list and your freaking calendar. Why are you wasting all this time doing shit you're not good at?
Yeah.
Maybe you should go close a fucking deal.
Yeah. No, not good at that.
There's the white guy, right? I got a client, Alejandro. He's a dear friend, and he says it's hard to tell where white supremacy stops and good business practices start.
Ah,
So there, you know, so there is this degree of like, you know, you don't close deals. You're not, you know, your landlord does not take intentionality as part of his, you know, it's not happening.
yeah,
The mortgage company does not care if you're out to cause transformation. They want their money.
right. Well, you know, it was, you know, there's this balance between the bootstrap mentality, like, okay, you've got to do things that maybe you don't want to do initially to get something off the ground. If you feel like you, but you know, like I know I've kind of bought into that as an approach, and
Well, most people will in the beginning because that's what you've been taught.
yeah, right.
You know, it's a struggle to win.
And then it's like,
How's
seriously?
that working out for you?
Yeah.
Oh, God.
That's right, you know, that's why it's like, okay, recreate the wheel all the time. But you know, one of the things, like once you help people get clear on what they're really good at, you help them also think about this whole concept of source commitments. So would you share a little bit about what that means? And, you know, you sort of alluded to it in what you're saying, but then like I remember you saying, okay, well then the people you actually want to work with share your source commitments. So
Yeah, that's what we say. So we see that, you know, the biggest predicator of conversion in business is shared commitments. Let me preface this by saying that we distinguish ourselves at looking at the phenomena of conversion, right? And we do believe it's a phenomena, like too hard to explain. So we distinguish ourselves in the market by looking at the phenomena of conversion through the lens of relational thought as opposed to transactional thought, right?
okay.
And anyone who's got an emotionally distant, you know, baby boomer father knows exactly what I'm talking about. Those dudes have always been trying to take emotions out of them. So we, you know, as business owners, we are tasked with trying to at least understand how a stranger turns into a client. That's the essence of business, right? That's what we're doing. And that's what we have to do before we can do what we want to do with people, right? We want to help people as entrepreneurs. That's why we, ourselves and other people, and businesses are fundamentally a tool of contribution. We know that. So we've got to look at, you know, what is the part of the business that gets someone from a stranger to a client? We want to understand that, right? And the thing is that human beings aren't transactional. Like, you know, when you come home from work, right, and you come home to your wife and your kids, you don't pull out a list and evaluate their behavior and decide whether to shoot them or to feed them based on the numbers. Like, that's just not how people work, right? And this is the legacy of like post-enlightenment rational thought that worked its way into philosophy and the economic system of this country. And, you know, go read The Wealth of Nations if you don't believe me. So there's this guy, Adam Smith, wrote that book. So when we're looking at that, you know, phenomena of conversion, like how a stranger becomes a client, we have to understand it from a humanistic perspective, right? So it's not, and this is where entrepreneurs fuck it up all the time. Look, nobody likes to be sold to that way. Listen to me, people, okay? You don't like to be treated like a number. Stop treating your clients like numbers. Nobody cares about your qualifications. If a prospect is in the room with you, in a conversation with you, is looking at your website, there's nothing you can say or do to convince them you're qualified or not. And frankly, people don't buy that pragmatic. Nobody asks me what my qualifications are. Thank God I have an associate's degree from the Community College of Denver. Now I got a business and I've sold a bunch of shit, so they'll listen. But, you know, and I got a lot of privilege. You know what I mean? Like, nobody cares. You know what people care about? Do you care about what they care about? Whether they know it or not. That's not to say like a prospect might not enter into the conversion space thinking that they're looking for a couple of things. But if you can demonstrate to someone in a non-transactional way what you're about first, you're empowering prospects to self-select.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a margin advantage, right? The less time you're spending on leads that won't close anyway, better off you are. And look, when they get to you, they're going to find out what you're about anyway. So you might as well just be honest about it up front. And I get it. I get that's precarious, and it's easy for me as a white guy to say, because I don't have a lot of determining characteristics that would prevent people from buying from me. And look, like, here's the thing, you know, if you're a BIPOC person and you're running in a business and people aren't finding out till the end of the deal that you're a person of color, then I get it. It's tough, right? I get it. It's tough. This shit is hard. It's hard. It's hard for all of us, right? Fundamentally, we've got it that we've got to be someone different than who we are for our businesses to work, and that's simply not true. And there's a lot of ramifications to that, which I get and which I can address. And if anybody wants to talk to me about it outside of here, you can contact me through our website. But I mean, fundamentally, that's what's so.
Well, I know in the early years of starting a consulting business, you know, it was all about making it look like I'm bigger than I am when I was starting, hiding behind really neutral language when I actually have some strong opinions about how I feel like things should happen out there in community. And, you know,
it worked.
It didn't work. And like, there's
it worked. No, it worked. It worked fine.
It worked fine.
It worked for you for a long time.
Yeah, well, for a time. But then it's like, okay, well, if people don't actually know who you are and what you can really do to help guide them with your experience, because you do understand some of where they're coming from, then it's sort of like shame on me that I'm like keeping that behind the curtain.
Totally, right? And so, and what you're languaging, and languaging so eloquently, I'd add, Sue, I love talking to you, is something we call the shift from a survival mentality to a performance mentality in business, right? Where we're fundamentally moving from a world, a reactive place of what's not possible, into a creative place of what's possible. In any business, if it stays around long enough, is going to have to deal with that. And what you want to talk about where there's no narrative for that. The game is like, it's like the love story. It's like happily ever after. And in business, the happily ever after is like your business starts working, you live happily ever after. Nobody's dealing with what's next. Right? And in the way that a business is supposed to iterate or move or grow when it's not operating from stockholder appeasement, right? Which is, and, you know, privately held businesses don't have to appease stockholders. So, you know, when we get to the point where, you know, we are doing okay, we don't know what to do. If we're not only committed to growth for the sake of growth, right? Yeah.
My internet faded for a second. There's a lot of construction going on, so sorry about that.
We're all used to it by now, aren't we?
It's like, welcome to Zoom and like working from home. It's like, ay. Well, like I think like behind all of this, and you know, you've been about it since you started your business, is really helping people get clear on who they are and how to show up as that through their business. So the business is a true manifestation of themselves and their values, and to use it as a force for good instead of using this facade and then do it on the side.
Because they're going to be better that way, right? Because, you know, when you're better at doing stuff that lights you up than you are at stuff that doesn't light you up. Everybody knows that.
Yeah. Watch me do.
It's true.
Ugh.
Yeah, in a business. So, you know, I was talking about this with a friend of mine, John Davey, and he's a very successful online marketer and strategist. And he's been a dear friend and was a client and an accountability partner and just we're in cahoots. And we were talking about what the demands are of the market now versus what the demands of the market were 25 years ago. And we got to remember that all of this philosophy comes from before the internet. And, you know, and people who are born before social media understand to some degree how different the world is because of social media. And people who were born after social media will never understand how different the world was before social media. And that's fine. But what we can say is that consumers are a demand for transparency and information about who they're working with, much so than ever before. And association matters. Who you work with matters. Who your friends are matters. Who is representing your business matters. Who your clients are matters. That matters now, and it never mattered before. So there's a demand for authenticity in a business, right? Alignment in a business. So, we can produce alignment in a business any way we want. I mean, we can just make up a set of values called core values and pretend that that's who we are when that's who we're not. Or we can just get responsible for what we really care about, which is, what's cool about entrepreneurs too, and about people in general, is they care about stuff. Mm-hmm. And they want to help people. So, people want to contribute. I mean, entrepreneurship is about contribution. So we just embrace that, right? So a lot of this is more about unlearning than learning. I mean, most people, when they started a business, started it from a position of they wanted something more for themselves. They wanted something more for their family, and they wanted something more for the world. And we're just getting them to remember that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when people do that source commitment work with us, it's not something new that gets created. It's like a recalibration of the business back to what got folks started in the first place. And when I get to do that for people, everything changes. It transforms. It's that easy. The forces that tell us that's not true, though, are just real strong.
Yeah. It's easy. Yeah. It's not easy, actually. Sometimes I think we're too close and in our own stuff, and it's not always easy to tease out, okay, what's the learned piece and what's real? And so, part of what I have appreciated is, you have some processes and ways of helping people tease those things apart. Because
it's not easy to get there.
Yeah.
It's easy once you get there. Yeah, no, thank you for that correction. I stand corrected. Getting there is hard. Once we get there, it becomes easier. And it's traditionally a process, right? And that's why we wanted to do distinction-based coaching. That's why we were focused on empowerment, because, we want entrepreneurs that we work with to be able to take the concepts we teach them into their business, whether they're paying us at the time or not. Because what we're about is causing transformation. We're not about monetization. Now, we're going to make our money, probably, maybe. I don't know. I mean, it's not really up to me, is it? That's the elephant in the room anyway. We're not as much in control of our future as we think we are. So, I don't know. I just refuse to let my entire business be dominated by a transactional mindset because, I'm obstinate. Because I'm a fucking socialist. What do you want? So that's how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think the whole, you got to show up as you, and the people that resonate with it are going to be in your orbit. Like I think more people are willing to accept that as how they're willing to do things. And I get it, people are going to, look, here's what's going to happen. Okay. Everybody knows that, right? Everybody knows to be authentic. And then they just, it's hard, right? So, you want to produce a result called authenticity in business, you better find someone who's an expert in what authentic businesses look and feel and smell and taste like. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's just what there is to get responsible. And this is the other myth, right? The bootstrap thing is like, Ashley Sims, who was a great contributor to our business for a long time, said, the point at which an entrepreneur, a solopreneur needs help happens well before they know. That's some patriarchy shit, right? Like the king is the idolized, is the ideal. In patriarchal culture, the king is the ideal, and the king never has to ask anybody for help, right? And because we've internalized patriarchy, we enter into the entrepreneurial space like asking for help is a sign of weakness, right? Mm-hmm. But really what we all know is that asking for help is a sign of courage and strength, right? And that's the fundamental nature of consulting that folks miss, right? Which is like what I'm saying is like, look, you know what you know, and you know way more than I know, and nobody knows more about your business than you do. But what we are good at is getting that out, getting you out, helping you navigate all this bullshit internalization, and helping you navigate and choose for yourself who you want to be in the marketplace instead of letting a patriarchal oppressive culture choose for you. That's all we're doing. It's transformation, and it's wonderful. And look, it's fun. And look, so Yeah.
It is, if you get there, right? And there's what there is to be responsible for all of us, that's not who we've been being. And that's just the nature of entrepreneurship. It's more like getting better at being authentic.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. It's like being willing to get on the journey. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I've heard you say, you know, you used to be sort of careful what you'd say on your Facebook page.
Oh, yeah, right.
But then as soon as you actually started sharing your real thoughts about things going on, your business like started booming.
Yeah, we experienced a huge growth. I mean, we're lucky. I mean, and it was like a happenstance. What happened is like Charlottesville.
Mm-hmm.
And I got really pissed off. I'm not cool with that shit. I'm not okay with like people walking down streets of places that slavery used to be legal, shouting the shit that those people did. And I'm not cool with a president who says that that's okay, because that's what he said.
Yeah.
Silence is also, silence is communication. I'm not cool with that. And I just lost it. Yeah. And I was totally playing it safe on my social media for a long time. And then I stopped. And, people like that. Some people like it.
Mm-hmm.
But what's cool is like, as entrepreneurs, we don't have to please everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Right to comfort again, right? White people, we're taught that like discomfort is bad and conflict is bad. And, this is what we have to learn from BIPOC people is like, those folks, they live in conflict every day of their fucking life, right? By being born the wrong color, right? For this culture. So BIPOC clients, and this is what I've learned from them, is like, no, try on that. Like the wrong way to run a business is to go about and avoid discomfort and confrontation and to avoid risk. The key is to be empowered to take risks when we know it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Or you can just pretend that you don't have any social views and keep taking that money. That's fine too. Just know I fucking see you, right? We all know what we're doing. Everybody knows what everybody's doing. You see it, you see it. And it's okay. Nobody gets a pass. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. But don't try to pass yourself off as an activist when really all you're doing is just like kowtowing to something and just taking that money. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We all know. Everybody knows. Nobody's fooling anybody in the internet. That's for damn sure, huh, Sue?
Yeah, no, that is completely right. Well, and the thing that I have appreciated about your approach to sharing what Kite Dart Group is about and the kind of entrepreneurs that excite you most to work with is you lead with contribution first. Pre-COVID, during the summit, we've been talking to different businesses about, okay, so what's in some ways, your lead generation strategy? How do you get people around? In some cases, how do you get things funded? But in your case, it's really about how do you get out there and offer value and food for thought and insights.
Right.
And people are in.
Yeah, well, we distinguish this as what we call position. So, and try on like, so intentionally, right? When I'm interacting with people, the way that I'm interacting with people, like right now, like who's going to listen to this podcast, I'm going to keep it off. I'm going to keep the deep strategy out. Okay, because because people are not going to listen to me about business strategy, right? Because they don't trust me, because they'd be stupid if they did, right? You know what I mean? Like you're going to let some random yelly white dude from the internet tell you how to run your business. It's not happening. Everything that I've been talking about is framed fundamentally in deep, hard business strategy. And here's what I'll talk about. So I'll give a little bit of that. So what we're fundamentally talking about is position. Okay, so try on that there's an optimal way for a business to be positioned to the market in as such that it pays a lower cost of acquisition per client than its competitors. Okay, there's some way that's out there to be discovered that if a business is positioned to the market in a certain way, it pays less per clients. Okay. Now, if you want to be a disruptor, which you have to as a startup, if you want to be a disruptor, the only way to disrupt is through margin. And the only way you're going to get margin is through lower COA. That's it. Otherwise, you'll never be able to grow, right? So what we look at is, instead of all of this stupid shit that people do, which is basically the entire world of marketing, which is turd polishing mediocre ideas, right, is we bring businesses to market that have some fucking edges, right, that get attention automatically, that have virality built in, right? And let's face it, in a culture where everybody's trying not to piss anybody off, being a business that knows who it is and knows what it cares about and comes out into the marketplace and says that is a huge competitive advantage from a perspective of cost of acquisition. Mm-hmm. Now, find someone to argue with me about that. No one's going to argue with me about that knows anything about marketing. Ask a marketer. Here's what we do. We hire marketing professionals and we don't go to them and say, what do I need to change about my business to make your life easier? We say, why don't you polish this piece of shit that's not selling? And if you can't generate organic conversion, you've got no business paying for leads. None. I'm a businessman too. And I care, right? I care that people like get what they want. And no entrepreneur comes into this game to deal with assholes and go out of business. And my stand is that they don't have to. We warned him I was a yelly white guy, right?
Yes, we did. Well, you have like some very strong, passionate viewpoints that you're not afraid to share.
No, man, and you know, I'm cool. Like, if you're the kind of person who'd rather go through life and just say what people want to hear, I'm not your fucking person. I'm not your huckleberry. Go find someone else.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Anna. I love you too. You know, and yeah.
Yeah, so.
I felt gotten. I'm going to say, Anna, and I feel gotten, and thank you for saying that in the comments. I feel really gotten.
Well, we're starting to wrap down on the end of our time, Nate. So tell folks a little bit about what's Kite and Dart doing online these days so that people that are resonating with your perspective can have more of a taster of what you're all up to. And then if they want to work with you, what should they do?
Well, they can come to the website, www.kitedart.com. You know, they open it up, it says the home of entrepreneurial activism, and there's a bunch of CTAs there. And so we give a free 1-hour coaching call. There's a link for that. We have a bunch of events like webinars that people can come to. You just click the link on the website. It'll take you to our Eventbrite page, and you'll see, I think we've always got like 8 or 10 things going on that folks can come and meet our community. Yeah, I mean, that's it. Just come to the website and, you know, and click on a link, and like, I'll talk to you. Thank you, Edwin. I appreciate you being here. Edwin is my son's name. So that's cool to see. Thanks for being here, Edwin. Yeah, so if anybody wants, you know, www.kitedart.com, kite like you fly, dart like you throw. You know, you click the link, I'm going to get an email in my inbox. I'm happy to talk to you. I mean, that's, you know, we're relational folks over here. So we like to really ask entrepreneurs a lot of questions, and we don't enter into every interaction like assuming like we're going to sell somebody something. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're probably going to ask people to do shit because it'd be weird if we didn't. We are activists, but, you know, it's not about that.
And I can underscore the events that have now moved online, that I've been to a number of them in person, like always great information and really great people as part of the community. So if this resonates with you, I definitely suggest you take advantage of all that Nate's offering. So Nate, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you, coming and sharing your, you know, outspoken and pretty unique view with everybody. I think it's a lot of great food for thought, and obviously it's resonating with some people like, wow, you know, they feel seen and heard, and it sounds like you do as well.
Oh, that's nice. And thank you everyone who for listening, and thank you, Sue, for putting this together and for using your voice to provide, you know, and using your platform to provide a voice for folks. So I appreciate you very much, and thanks for having me today.
Okay. Thanks, Nate. Thanks everybody for tuning in, whether you were live or listening to the recording. We appreciate having you be interested in using business as a force for good, and what are all the different ways to do that. So hopefully you've been getting great value from this session and the others. And I just want to remind you that all the recordings are up in the YouTube channel. So please make sure you listen to a lot of people. There's nuggets every single person has offered. So bye-bye for now. See you next session.